Good evening, everyone. I've got some really good news finally to report in relation to the issue of mandatory vaccinations. But before I go into some of the detail, I just wanted to also give you a bit of a heads up that I've been interviewed on tonight. The Alan Jones show on Sky News goes to air at 8 p.m. tonight. So I'll have an interview on there with the leader of the opposition. So if you're able to watch Sky News and you're interested, just have a look from 8 o'clock tonight. I'll be on there. But just really quickly, I just wanted to bring to your attention something that was brought to my attention this afternoon, and that is the Fair Work Commission's decision that was handed down on Monday of this week. It's in relation to an appeal lodged by an aged care worker who was sacked from her job because she refused to have a flu vaccine. And that worker appealed that decision of the Fair Work Commission to endorse it. And the decision was handed down on Monday. Now, I know that was talking about a flu vaccine, but what's interesting in this report, and it is going to be linked on my Facebook page because I really want to encourage as many people as possible to actually read the number of pages I'm going to refer to. So if you get the document, it's 44 pages long, but part two is where the action really happens for us who are fighting the mandatory vaccination policy of the government, or you lose your job. Okay, so part two is headed Vaccine Requirements in relation to COVID. Now, it goes from page 32 to page 44, and it is pretty shocking in terms of what this Fair Work Commission has determined in relation to the settings around that vaccination should be voluntary, around the hesitancy of people having this COVID vaccine, around the use of public health orders to mandate vaccination coverage. And let me just cover off a couple of key points. But again, I really want to encourage you, have a look at the document, go straight to page 32 of page 44 and have a read yourself. It's pretty easy to read, but I just want to highlight a couple of things for you tonight. All right, what's interesting, this year, the Australian Council of Trade Unions and the Business Council of Australia, they issued a joint statement on mandatory COVID vaccinations in which it acknowledged that the Australian government's COVID vaccination policy, that the vaccine is voluntary, and confirmed the views of the BCA and the ACTU that for the overwhelming majority of Australians, your work or workplace should not fundamentally alter the voluntary nature of vaccination. Okay, so that was included in this document today. The Fair Work Ombudsman has also come out and said that the overwhelming majority of employers should assume they can't require employees to be vaccinated against coronavirus. Safe Work Australia has publicly stated that most employers will not need to make vaccinations mandatory in order to meet their health and safety obligations. And it gets more and more interesting. Mandatory COVID vaccinations, this is a thing that we're all fighting against, however, cannot be justified in almost every workplace in Australia. While there are a number of reasons for this decision, that is the decision in this document, will focus on three things: the requirement for freely given and informed consent for medical procedures, denying an unvaccinated person the ability to work on health and safety grounds, whether at the initiation of an employer or as part of a public health order, and the requirements to comply with disability discrimination laws. Now, what's interesting is that this Fair Work Commission decision has actually identified a couple of things that you have all been talking to me about, but which I have been a little bit reluctant to say publicly on this channel. But I'm reading the words from the Fair Work Commission. All right. Before turning to a consideration of these reasons I've just mentioned above, it is important to set the context with some information that is publicly available and should be uncontroversial. Unlike many other vaccinations, such as those used to stop the spread of tetanus, yellow fever, and smallpox, COVID vaccinations are not designed to stop COVID. They are designed to reduce the symptoms of the virus. However, a fully vaccinated person can still contract and transmit COVID. The science is clear in that COVID is less serious for those who are young and otherwise healthy compared to those who are elderly or have comorbidities, and they gave some statistics. The World Health Organization has stated that most people diagnosed with COVID will recover without the need for any medical treatment. The vaccines are only provisionally approved for use in Australia and are accordingly still part of a clinical trial. There are side effects to the COVID vaccines that are now known. That side effect exists is not a conspiracy theory. The long-term effects of the COVID vaccines are unknown, and this is recognised by the Therapeutic Goods Administration in Australia. And they go into a lot of talk around consent is required for participation in clinical trials. So the Fair Work Commission has identified that the COVID vaccines are actually part of a clinical trial, and they go into a lot of detail around the requirements, the legal and the internationally binding requirements that a participant in a clinical trial must provide consent, and what does that consent entail. I won't go into any of the details, but again, I urge you to please read this document because it is monumental to people who are fighting the forced vaccination public health orders of this state. There's a point here on page 35. Can COVID vaccinations be mandated by employers on health and safety grounds? And their first response is, the short answer to this question in almost every case is no. Well, that's a decisive decision for you. Let me go over. It says, critically, there is another alternative to vaccines to assist employers in meeting their work, health and safety obligations, and that is being tested. Actually, the rapid antigen testing or other tests, PCR tests, which many of us have had. Testing is arguably a better control measure compared to vaccines in meeting health and safety obligations, because you pretty much can determine if someone has the virus or doesn't have the virus with the test, whereas we already know that those who are vaccinated can still carry the virus. In short, there is no justifiable basis for employers to mandate COVID vaccinations to meet their health and safety obligations when there are other options available to appropriately manage the risk. Now, it goes on to more and more evidence that backs up our fight against mandatory vaccinations, or people will lose their job. All right, but let me now turn to the final comments. Now, their final comments are powerful, absolutely powerful. And if you don't read anything else in this report, then turn to page 41 and read the comments under the heading called Final Comments. Here it is. Research in the context of COVID-19 has shown that many who are vaccine hesitant are well educated, work in the healthcare industry, and have questions about how effective the vaccines are in stopping transmission, whether they are safe to take in pregnancy or if they affect fertility. A far safer and more democratic approach to addressing vaccine hesitancy and therefore increasing voluntary vaccine uptake lies in better education, addressing specific and often legitimate concerns that people may hold, and promoting genuine informed consent. It does not lie in censoring differing opinions or removing rights and civil liberties that are fundamental in a democratic nation. It certainly does not lie in the use of highly coercive, undemocratic, and unethical mandates. The statements by politicians that those who are not vaccinated are a threat to public health and should be locked out of society and denied the ability to work are not measures to protect public health. They are not about public health, and not justified because they do not address the actual risk of COVID. These measures can only be about punishing those who choose not to be vaccinated. If the purpose of the public health orders is genuinely to reduce the spread of COVID, there is no basis for locking out people who do not have COVID, which is easily established by a rapid antigen test. Conversely, a vaccinated person who contracts COVID should be required to isolate until such time as they have recovered. Blanket rules such as mandating vaccinations for everyone across a whole profession or industry, regardless of the actual risk, fails the test of proportionality, necessity, and reasonableness. It is more than the absolute minimum necessary to combat the crisis and cannot be justified on health grounds. It is a lazy and fundamentally flawed approach to risk management and should be soundly rejected by courts when challenged. All Australians, those who are vaccinated and those who may not be able to get vaccinated and those who are vaccine hesitant, should vigorously oppose the introduction of a system of medical apartheid and segregation in Australia. It is an abhorrent concept and is morally and ethically wrong. And the antithesis, or the opposite, let me turn the page, to our democratic way of life and everything we value. Australians should also vigorously oppose the ongoing censorship of any views that question the policies regarding COVID. Science is no longer science if a person is not allowed to question. Well, friends, that is unbelievably powerful, and that is an endorsement of the hundreds and thousands of individuals and families and business owners who have been contacting me about this mandatory vaccination policy or you'll lose your job. This is the document here. I'm putting the link down to that document in full. Please look at it, share it around. This has to go viral because right now, as of tomorrow, the healthcare workers have their deadline to have their first dose, or they're out of a job. They will either be put off, sacked, or the Minister for Health said leave without pay, which is in effect sacking. Well, how long is leave without pay going to last for? Again, Fair Work Commission has just said that a blanket mandatory vaccination policy breaches our democratic way of life. It is far and above more than what is necessary to contain the public health risk, which is the purpose of a public health order. It's more about control and now punishing people who haven't got the vaccine. This is not Australia, people. We need to stand up, spread this message around, share this Fair Work Commission decision, share it to all your friends, tell them where to go from page 31 onwards. That's the relevant stuff about COVID vaccinations. Share this video around. This is the facts. Finally, this commission has determined that what our government in New South Wales is doing is gone way too far. And it has to stop. It has to stop now. Right now. So share this post, share the video, share the link, read it, understand what it's saying. And you know what? We'll keep at it. We will keep going. We will keep going. Thank you for your time and have a great night. Until we talk again. Bye for now.